indigenous communities, communities of color, and immigrant communities. By offering this acknowledgement of trauma, we affirm the right of people to bring their whole selves and stories into this space, and we affirm our intention to promote healing, respect, and love.
Thank you, Kristen. If I can figure this out, so we're gonna have a really wonderful conversation. We have a few people who are going to share more about solar on the schools. And this is how you should expect the conversation to go. And Julia, I'm gonna pass it on to you to talk about our legislative agenda.
Beautiful, thank you, Juve. So as many of you know, because you were with us last Tuesday, the 10th, Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light has joined with incredible partners from faith organizations like the Minnesota Council of Churches, Jewish Community Action, Moose Jaw, the Unitarians, the Episcopal Church, and indigenous organizations. We have worked specifically with Honor the Earth, but also with Bob Blake at Native Son and others. And more recently, we've been building the movement to include environmental justice organizations, Take Action and Minnesota 350, and others will be joining us in this work. And so overall, we have 5 buckets of our agenda this spring at the legislature. We want to be focusing on reparations, on truth-telling around our climate goals, 100% campaign, but much more than that. We want to do economic development and just transition work. That's where this solar in schools comes in. We want to focus on protecting the people through our regulatory process in the light of what's happened around Line 3. And we want to think about what are the ways that we really promote environmental justice in the land. So that's our big agenda. Today's study group is a subset of that. We're hoping that as we move some of these things forward, that we will have a group of folks who really know about specific components of the agenda. And I want to say a most important and special welcome to Kristen Poppleton from Climate Generation. We will be partnering tightly with them and with Honor the Earth on this solar on schools legislation in order to move us to a place where we have solar that can be available in every school in Minnesota. And so I'll let Sarah and others talk about what that agenda looks like. But I wanted to, welcome everybody who's part of this bigger agenda, and to say that there's going to be a team working specifically on an organizing plan to get solar on schools across the finish line. So I'll hand it back to you, Jose.
Thank you, Julia. I was just going to add that the platform and a lot more details are available on the website. And so it'll be on each slide on the bottom right. So now I'm going to pass it on to Sarah to talk more about how it actually works.
Thanks, Juve. So great to see all of you. My name is Sarah Wolf, and I've been serving in the Strategic Policy Director role with MNIPL since August. It's been an exciting time to be part of this organization that I've admired so much. And we really have such amazing opportunities with this session. And the combination of the legislators who are working with us and for us as a state, and also the surplus that we have, which we know is a lot of one-time money, but also a wonderful opportunity for how we can build that. So why have we focused on putting solar on schools, for instance, when we could put solar on anything? Well, first of all, we know it's a highly popular program, that it was enacted in 2021 with legislation then, and it had really 2 components to it. The first part was using funds from the Renewable Development Account, which is an account funded by Excel to be used in Excel ratepayer territory. And this account was directed to put about $8 million into a solar on school program in its service territory. So it's done that for largely the metro area. But we didn't want to leave, the state didn't want to leave the rest of Minnesota behind, of course. And so for greater Minnesota, they had $8 million in funding from the general fund to work with rural schools. And that part was administered to the Department of Commerce and has been hugely successful. They had $11 million worth of applications over that. So they weren't able to meet fully the need that they found even on that first round of applications. But even with that, they have served 85 different schools in 45 districts. So we know this is a hugely popular program, and it makes sense because putting solar on anything, anytime you're putting solar in part of your energy makeup, you're reducing your energy burden. You're going to be saving money as well as doing good things. But when we put it on schools, we're able to make sure we're reaching every part of the state. And we're also giving a really tangible way for people to interact with solar in their communities. So it makes sense on so many levels. This slide really shows us that it's the things you already know about, right? It's reducing the energy burden on the school, and that frees up other funds that can be used for other things. We'll have a nice case study of how that works in a minute from Julia. And it also is an opportunity for schools to be able to help their students engage with the technology, and it reduces greenhouse gas emissions. But what we know too is that the experience of the various schools doing this program has been uneven across the state. So those are the things we want to fix with this next round of the solar on schools expansion, we hope, and fixing some of the things. For instance, right now, only class 1 and 3 schools are eligible to be part of the program. We want to expand that, and especially adding tribal schools and other schools that may need to be made available. A second piece is removing the 40 kilowatt limitation that's in place on rural schools that are outside of that Excel area. This limitation this cap of 40 kilowatts was put on when they made the first round of legislation, but that is essentially powering a large home. So what you have then is schools getting a solar array that's not really maximizing the potential they have to serve their population. So that is something that we know we need to deal with. And how do we do that? Well, we're creating 3 different kind of funding streams within this legislation. One is creating a loan program for schools to be able to get upfront money for their solar array. We know that the Inflation Reduction Act, just passed this last August, gives great opportunities for schools to receive 30%, in many cases up to 50 and 60% of the cost of the array back to them, but they still will need upfront funds. So this expansion allows for a revolving loan fund of sorts to be able to give schools that upfront money. But we also want to be able to grant solar array operations to those schools that would be eligible. So it would be expanding the grant program that goes along with a loan program to provide those options. Another barrier that we've seen, and in terms of really maximizing potential, particularly in greater Minnesota, is that sometimes the utilities, the rural electric co-ops and the municipalities, the munis, have a need of upgraded transmission systems and substations. And so this legislation would give a grant program to those utilities that would be able to then upgrade their systems to accommodate the solar on schools that's being built in their neighborhood. So those are some of the main components of what we hope this next round of legislation will bring. Thanks, Huve. You're doing such a great job of keeping up with me. I just so appreciate it. And really what our vision is for Solar on School is that the arrays that we build are right-sized for the school's needs and the available space they have. What we know going forward is that we're not just talking about powering the electrical load that we have now. We know that that is going to grow. As we do beneficial electrification, we start to heat schools with electricity instead of other forms of fossil fuels. As we put in charging infrastructure for vehicles from cars to electric school buses, that load's going to increase. So we need to be able to think forwardly and right-size these arrays. Secondly, we want to incorporate battery storage to fulfill the needs of the school through the day and the seasons, and to have that resiliency that we'd like our systems to have. And also to incorporate that charging infrastructure for cars and electric school buses. Many of the vehicles that we see coming out now have bidirectional charging, which means that your school bus could serve as a power source for the school if it needed that. So those are exciting ways for us to really be efficient and maximize potential here. So we're really excited about fully realizing everything that this program can bring. Thanks. And I think we have a wonderful guest speaker. Huve, back to you.
Hey, thank you. We have two people who are gonna share a little bit of how Solar in Schools works, or how the current law doesn't meet all the needs. And Julia, I think we'll play a video first before we go to Mary.
Let me just tell you a little bit about this video, folks. This is a video that we created as part of the Just Solar Coalition Northland Solar Tour. So huge thanks to Climate Generation and to Real Solar. You'll see Simon Eddy, and to Hunt Utilities Group. We went up to the Bacchus Pine River area in May of 2022 and just went to some of these sites where solar had been installed. So what you'll see is a very small scale array, a huge solar array that's serving the Pine River Bacchus School District, and also a solar array that's on the farm of a local business person in Brainerd. And so you can get a sense of the different opportunities for solar in the Northland as we start to think about expanding economic opportunities through renewable energy across Minnesota. So we'll watch the video. I'm going to say a few words about the Pine River Bacchus array. Simon Eddy from Real Solar was going to be here, but he had a client meeting, so he has empowered me to sort of share his story. And then we'll hand it over to Marie, who's going to talk about the story of two schools, right, where the solar array did not actually work yet. So she'll talk about Pine Point on the White Earth Reservation. Okay, so I'm going to share this video. Okay.
One kilowatt total solar right there, which is what powers this Mosley Offer department. We do supply them with electricity for heat in the wintertime. And this is just dirt on the roof, just planted as a grassland, and there's not much for ticks or bugs up here. Whenever you can be more resilient and use sustainable energy, you are doing less damage than we're using less sustainable methods. Our focus is on resilient living and resilient housing in particular. It's always a good thing to keep as much money in your local community as you possibly can, rather than give it to organizations that are going to funnel it out of your local community.
Okay. In the first year, this saved the school over $30,000, just pretty much off the bat. And, you know, they can spend that money on teachers or supplies.
It takes people, organizations like Real, it takes people standing up, people like you standing up to say, hey, we want to see this in more places.
The Just Solar Coalition is a group of environmental organizations that are all partnered together, influencing our legislature to make sure that they push certain legislation that supports solar, whether it be community solar or solar on schools, making solar more available and affordable. It puts you in a position where you are actually becoming the utility.
You see all the solar panels, it's really neat technology. And then on a sunny day, you've always got to go back and watch the meter spin. Because on a sunny day, that thing is just cooking. My name is Bob Nivy. I work at Boysenberry's Farm and Greenhouse, located in Brainerd, Minnesota. We moved onto the farm in 1999 and raised our boys here. I've always had an interest in this clean energy. You hear about the horror stories of the grids going down. And this may be one way where you can localize the power generation.
Most of us are all struggling financially. If you ask anybody, if you could create power on your property without inconveniencing your lifestyle, the way you live, and sell that power to the utility that you're paying for every single month, would you do it? Guaranteed. Most people would say yes to that.
I want to see the people and the place I know as Northern Minnesota flourish. We're in this time and place right now where we desperately need solutions to problems that are in front of us. And I'm talking about as a planet, as a people, in terms of the climate crisis. But as we do that, I think as we look at what the causes of those are, I think the causes of that issue are often rooted in very simple justice issues. To address a big problem like climate change, we have to address justice everywhere where we live.
All right. Huge thanks to Devin Kupri, Miracle Cloud Media. She did a beautiful job of capturing the essence of that day, where we were able to see all these different, from little one kilowatt arrays to 40 kilowatts, which is what we saw on the farm, to 800 kilowatts, which is what we saw behind that lock gate at the school. Huve, do you have another slide for me from Simon?
Yes.
Beautiful. So I wanted to just dig into the details of that solar on school array from Simon Eddy at Real Solar. This is a picture, obviously a drone footage of the solar array in the winter. That's a 800 kilowatt array there. This array is providing, okay, let me just say a word again. This is a study group, so you all are going to get a little bit more deeply knowledgeable about how solar works. If you put 800 kilowatts of DC power that's coming from the panels, that energy then goes into the meter, into the grid, and it's turned from DC power to AC power. So what the utility has coming into its system is 660 kilowatts of AC power. So again, we've built a 800 kilowatt DC array. It's turned into 660 AC watts. Let me tell you a little bit about the Pine River Bacchus High School. I looked it up. It's got not that many students. It's got 386 students, grades 7 through 12. It's a great place. They've got a teacher-student ratio of 16:1. And they are serving, a rural area that involves a number of different towns, bringing students into that place. So this array of 800 DC kilowatts is serving 80% of that particular school's annual usage. And as Simon said, it saved them $30,000 in the first year when they built it. Now, this was a school that was able to take advantage of a partnership between Real Solar and a private investor. And I have to tell you, the disappointing part of this private investor story is that it turns out that the private investor actually sold out, and it's Minnesota Power is now the owner of the private investor who helped to build this array. So basically, this array is owned by Minnesota Power. And the school gets a small discount, $30,000, that they can use for teachers and other things, as Simon said. So this is not a bad deal. This is a good deal for Pine River Bacchus School District. Unfortunately, most schools in Minnesota don't have access to that private investor. Even if they did, they would not own the utility. So as Christelle was saying in that video, if you had the opportunity to get a zero interest loan and to be able to own an array, and you'll pay back your loan with what you saved from your electricity, but you're going to be spending a lot less than you would be spending on your power bill, who wouldn't do that? Everybody would do that. So what we're hoping to do is to give, if in fact Pine River was to do this array today, if they were to do it under the new scenario that we're painting, they would, and this was sort of back of the envelope math that Simon and I did as we were thinking through this array, but basically that they could generate with the electricity that's generated. Again, you see the snow on these panels during the winter. There's less light because there's less daylight hours, and sometimes the panels are covered with snow. So you're going to generate a lot less electricity in the winter than you are in the spring or the summer. But in any case, on average, you might generate what is the equivalent of $104,000 of electricity. If you assume that electricity costs 10 cents a watt. You would be spending about $42,000 to pay back a zero interest loan. If you had a loan for 25 years from the state, you would be spending about $42,000 a year to pay back your loan, which means that the school would be saving $62,000 a year on their electricity. So the question is, what could you as a school do with $62,000? Kristen Poppleton, I bet you have some ideas what people might be able to do with that. Do you want to speak up and say a couple things?
As I shove food in my mouth.
Yeah. Sorry.
So I have some great ideas, I think. No. So as many of you probably know, climate generation primarily focuses on education and youth empowerment and community education, I would say as well. Our focus is on education engagement as a critical solution to climate change. And we also know there's a pretty major workforce gap out there for we can put as many solar panels, we can want to put as many solar panels up as we want to, but if we don't have folks that actually know how to do that, then we're in a real problem there. And that is a major issue across the country, and the state is not excluded from that. I am aware of a number of states across the country that have been, now it's becoming cool and a thing to be passing, putting into finance funding for training for teachers that is focused specifically on climate change education, on green careers, and making those connections. And so I am not a policy expert. I don't know how you fit this in, but I would be interested in including in the upgrade, the making this more ambitious, a piece that includes that money that goes back to the school perhaps is used to pay for training for teachers to be bringing education about renewables and energy and green careers into the classroom or curriculum or related things. I know there's a line between curriculum dictating in this state that you can't cross, but I'm interested to pursue that. And we definitely have a network of educators and youth in the state that would be very excited to be pushing and promoting that. From an education and equity perspective, I think including that piece would be really important, and also something that, of course, at like the governor level, I mean, all he's talking about right now is education. So it seems like it would have some support at different levels as well.
Thank you so much, Kristen. I guess I will end here and just say this school district to me is a really wonderful example. Oh, this is sorry, we could go to this next slide just quickly. This is what I said. Sorry, go back for a second to the last slide. This one, this is what I said. Nope, the next one up. Nope, that one. There we go. So this is, if we made the changes according to this new proposal that we have, this is one scenario that they might have. This is what I scripted out for you. So let's skip past those next two slides, Huve, and let's hand the mic over to Marie Kilswarrior. And I'll just introduce Marie. Marie was part of this Northern Minnesota tour, but also has been working on tribal land, trying to figure out how to take advantage of some of these state and national programs to make solar possible on schools there. And you guys have had a very different experience at Pine Point. So I'll hand it to you, Marie.
Yeah, hello everybody. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, all right. Cool, thank you. So I am on the kind of like the back and forth between A-Fire, Honor the Earth, the Just Transition team. But so we went on to go ahead, and our project is the Pine Point School, which is a K-8 school located on the White Earth Reservation. And this here is just a quick picture that I pulled off Google Maps of what the overall community looks like. And one of the reasons why we wanted to go with Pine Point School is one, it's a year-round school. It's an all-electric building, and it also serves as a tornado shelter, community elderly center located over on the west side of the building. So they cook elderly meals almost every single day and get those out to the elders. And as well as a lot of the students rely on the free lunch, the free meals that come from the school. They go over to the next slide. So definitely wanting to incorporate more renewable energy at an early stage, as was mentioned earlier, into some of the students' lives. That we did what we called was the solar suitcase. And this actually allowed the students to build their own mini microgrid to either charge phones or see how a little light, just to let them know, like, hey, like this is what's going to be coming, and we want you guys to, have a little bit of a hands-on on this piece of technology that's coming your way. And this was with the Trees, Water, People, along with Honor the Earth, and We Share Solar. And that's where we got the solar suitcases from. And go on to the next slide, Uwe. And so a lot of the students were just trying to also keep them culturally grounded, and also wanting them to be more aware of the technology that's out there. But we also understand where a lot of the students come from, and a lot of them are enrolled members on the reservation. They live on the reservation, and a lot of them are Native American. And so, of course, there isn't very much for schools on the reservation. Other than that, they either have to go to a school that's off, or another school that's maybe about 30, 40 miles away from where they live. Next slide. And another one, just to keep them more culturally grounded, is that they incorporated a Good Life program. And so, being Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, they have a lot of connection with the horses, and then with the lands, and then of course, with the syruping, and we're using the natural, medicines and foods. And then also, the arts. They're very artistic people, and they have a lot of these murals that are around all of their homes within the Pine Point community. But also recognizing that a lot of their livelihoods are around their ecosystem. If you're, incorporating more renewable technology to help protect that cultural livelihood that has been around for decades, and kind of aligning that with today's modern technology to ensure that these practices are still alive. Go to the next slide. And so, whenever it first began, is that there's actually developed in collaboration with Real, and putting a 21 kilowatt system there. So the system right here now is there, and it's the current system we want to expand on. And so This system is only 21 kilowatts and it barely offsets a small percentage of the overall usage of the school. And so although we're not part of Excel's territories, we still have some challenges that are along with some of the cooperatives that we will be interconnecting with. And with this one in particular, due to the size of the system, it was never interconnected to the grid. And here's why. One, there's what you call, you go to the next slide, it's called the grid access charge, a GAC. And then so whenever we went to go have a meeting with Itasca Mantrap about why it wasn't being interconnected, and they had told us was because they did not go through with the interconnection because they saw no point because of the fees, the demand charges, the grid access charges. They just said it wouldn't be worth it. And then also that even brings it up to like there's a lot, although it's where it's located at, there's still people that have an interest in renewable technology. And there's certain levels or certain barriers that we have to go through. One, because of how we want to expand on, make it a bigger system, we're going to have to collaborate with Great River Energy on what the rates, the purchasing, and what that's going to. But we would also task a mantra interconnection, because anything over 40 kilowatts goes over to the distributive generation or the distributed energy, the bigger provider, I guess. You can go to the. And so, but we are proposing on the 21 kilo. So this is station A is on the north side, and we want to expand 148 kilowatts. And we wanted to add it a 4.6 megawatt battery backup. And what this will do is, so even though we wanted to try and negate the grid access charge by putting our excess energy into batteries, the second part of the conversation with Itasca Mantrap is they had told us that that wouldn't do anything. The GAC is still going to be there regardless, we export excess energy back onto the grid. And so we're like, okay, well, it's like, all right, what do we do then? And like to do is peak load shaving. And so the size of our battery system will be able to offset power to school for 2 days. Whenever the lights do go out, they would still be able to have that resiliency safety hub and go to the school and, you know, get the water, cook the food, and be there until the lights come back up. But whenever the school is not in session, we would be able to use the excess energy that's in the batteries to negate the high demand charges during the day whenever school is in session. And so definitely incorporating this function into our system will help offset even more electricity and have even more savings. That's what we're shooting for. Go to the next slide. And so, of course, with the system this size, we have to develop, collaborate with the Pine Point School Board, the community committee, the Taro program, the wider community college, and of course, the economic development, all with the wider reservation. And to let people know that in order for this to be viable, for it to be feasible throughout the reservation, we're going to need to develop more systems, whether that's off-grid, grid-tied, or even just some small training opportunities. That's going to help us develop a workforce even more and to utilize the brand new tribal public utility that is going to be put into work next month, for them to make sure that more of these like systems could be deployed throughout the wider reservation with all these benefits that follow after. And then, of course, having that hearsay and exercising energy sovereignty. I believe that's the last slide.
Yeah, that's the last one. Thank you, Marie. So now, or the last thing before we sort of let you go with a lot of homework and solve this for the state of Minnesota, we want to open it up for questions from Marie, Julia, Sarah, either about what we're proposing or how the program is been working. And I don't have access to the chat right now, so if just ask your question.
You all can put so you can see Sarah has just put into the chat a fact sheet that we have on the, maybe we can stop sharing the slides and people can bring up the fact sheet on their screen. But that maybe gives you a little bit of context for the changes that we're requesting for the current statute, to the current statute. And I have sort of a question for you, Marie, to kick us off. And please, folks, put your questions, doesn't matter how either small or big they are, in the chat, and we'll go from there. But my question to you, Marie, is as you think about a new solar on schools statute that might give zero interest loans to every school, including tribal schools, that would require the utilities to interconnect these arrays, and that would get do away with the 40 kilowatt maximum that was currently in the statute. How would that change the game for you at Pine Point? Marie, you're on mute. There we go.
Yeah, sorry about that. My internet just went and lagged out on me and kicked me off of Zoom, so I apologize about that.
Did you hear my question?
No, I didn't. I literally just sent you a text saying that I was having internet issues.
So I just said, you gave a story in which, I mean, really, you've built a very small array, but you couldn't even get that one connected. You have plans for a much bigger array. How could the proposed changes to the Solar on Schools statute move your project along better? What would the impact of changing the law be for your project?
So definitely for our project it's only a 21 kilowatts. That's only half of 40. And that's not even gonna offset, it's probably gonna save the school maybe about 25, 50 bucks, maybe. But definitely that limitation really kind of, doesn't make sense. And especially with us being outside of XL territory, it makes it even harder for us to get our hands on some of the rewards that this program has to offer. And then also being a public school on a reservation should even make them open their eyes more to expanding further out to all reservations in Minnesota. Because I'm pretty sure if we're experiencing some of these challenges, I'm pretty sure that there's other schools that are experiencing the same thing. And then also, creating the resiliency hub, but definitely allowing us, or even us trying to get even financing. That's our next part, is there's going after all of these federal grants that are out there. If we were able to be a part of that 0%, loan program, I'm pretty sure we would be able to bring this project to life. But even so, I mean, between March of 2021, March of 2022, the school has spent an estimate of $80,000 in electricity costs.
Do you have any idea what size of array would you need to cover 120% of your energy usage at that school? You don't have to have an answer, but any back of the envelope idea?
Yeah, so the system that talked about in the PowerPoint is it's a 448 kilowatt system, and that's on the baseball field. So that would be enough to negate maybe 60–70% offset. And we wanted to put an additional 227 kilowatts on the school roof. But due to some poor workmanship, some of the contractors, we're gonna actually have to get a whole new roof and if we want to add on to the roof of the school. So the additional, we're looking at maybe 600 and I think it's like 654 kilowatts total.
Yep, and just to give people a sense of that, if, sort of on the ambient cost of solar per watt, if you were to build a 1 megawatt system, which is 1,000 kilowatts, so 1,000 versus 670, that would cost in rural Minnesota about $1.7 million. So your array might cost $1 million or a little more than $1 million. And our proposal is that the state would give you a zero interest loan to cover that whole array, and then you would pay the federal government back the amount that they reimburse you after the first year. You'll get 40 to 70% of the cost of that array will be paid for by the IRA, which is so exciting. But if there's no loan program to make it possible for you to take advantage of those IRA funds, you won't be able to build the array. So one of the really exciting parts of this program is that we would leverage the federal dollars by making it possible for everybody to build their array and then recoup that federal money.
Marie, there is a question on the chat. Why are the Pine Point energy costs so high, if you know?
So one, as I had mentioned before, is that, well, first of all, that is a great question. The energy costs are so high is because of the envelope, and a lot of where the heat escapes, the cool air escapes, is through the roof of the school. And with the school's roof, that was done, very poorly. That's why that allows to happen. The school roof has leaks. There's water that comes in every winter, every spring. And then also it's an all electric building. I mean, everything from the deep fryers, there's no propane, no natural gases. So it's a huge customer of Itasca Mantrap. And we're also, and that's another reason why we wanted to implement the battery backup, was for that peak load shaving. So that way we can negate a lot more of those charges. And it's a year-round school.
Thank you. This is, Marie, feel free to pitch in. But there is a question about what obstacles or pushback do we expect at the legislature, and is there a draft bill and authors for the bill?
So I am. So one is that, one for Christopher's question was like, yes, we do have geothermal heat, which is another on the other north side of the building. And as far as legislature, I think the pushback would probably just tries to be more energy efficient and try to get our roof fixed. But again, that's going to be an ongoing uphill battle that we're trying to incorporate into the dollars that are available through the bipartisan infrastructure law, is getting our roof incorporated into that budget. But we are also trying to file an insurance claim as well.
Thanks for bringing that up. I think one of the sort of nuanced details that we need to consider, we're going to in a minute ask you to think about talking to local schools in your area. And one of the places where solar gets hung up sometimes is that there are other things that need to happen before solar goes on. And so one of the things we'd like to address in this bill is making sure that schools have the opportunity to do things like roof repairs, or that the utilities in Greater Minnesota will have the opportunity to get a grant to actually upgrade their substations so that they can hook these schools up. We want to make sure that when we have this huge surplus, that we're using it in a way that will capitalize the opportunity for schools to have solar. And And that means removing the barriers, like Marie has been talking about. Sarah, do you want to say a word about where we're at with the bill in the legislature? Or Juve, one or the other?
Yeah, well, yeah. As we mentioned, there are a lot of groups that are and legislators who know the value of solar on schools. There are 85 schools around greater Minnesota that have participated with the program, and the demand is outpacing that. So we think there's strong support for it. We think what we need to do is focus on the education about the parts that aren't allowing us to reach the full potential of this, and the opportunity that's present, especially with the federal incentives through the Inflation Reduction Act. So we need to do some education about this and getting the word out. We know that there's a large surplus, but we also know that there are so many needs. And so it's a matter of telling the story about how we can do so many things with this one particular piece of legislation. We can not only work towards our climate goals, but we can be working towards the just transition. We can be working towards that workforce development. We can be working towards equity throughout our communities, and we can be working to help schools, all with this particular piece. So we're definitely in the midst of talking with authors right now, those who have authored it in the past, those who are going to be looking to author this in the present. And really, I'm excited for this next section where we're talking with you about how we can tell the story about what a great opportunity this is.
I can quickly answer Joan's question. Will the IRA have additional solar benefits to metro area schools? In the metro area, they were only able to, I think that this number is correct, service 8 schools under the current program. This would really make this available to every school to have a no interest loan. So while they don't have all the same barriers that rural Minnesota has, they don't have the upfront capital. So this will be available to them, of course, and we anticipate every metro school will easily get the money, and they won't have to just get it from Excel. They can get it from the state. So that, I think this is, clearly a benefit for both groups. In terms of bill jacketing and authoring, we have an incredible legislative affairs consultant, Patricia Torres Rey, who's working with us and with Ventino to get this across the finish line. So she is working to get a bill jacketed and in process this week. So she just emailed me actually during this session and said, get me the final language. And so we're doing that. We have a couple of consultants who are helping us translate these bodacious goals into what it looks like in the actual statute. And Jean, you're on the line. I just want a huge props to you. You've been through this process so many times. So we would love to offline sort of talk with you about what that looks like in the nuts and bolts in the statute. We've literally been taking the old statute and writing in the new statute. It's been super fun.
I think the vision is a great one. So I'm applauding you. I think the resistance is that electricity for schools has been a cash cow for utilities for years, and they don't want to let go of that cash cow. So that's one of the things, just the reality that you're dealing with. So yes, let's talk more about that and efficiency, because school, Great River Energy, for example, said years ago that efficiency was done in outstate Minnesota. It was all finished, which was nonsense. But that's, they have not been held accountable for that either. So we can talk about it.
Totally. Thank you, Jean. I want to say one major thing that we want to build into this is some serious grant money for utilities to make this happen so it doesn't cost them a cent, so that there's no pressure for them to come up with money to pay for transformers and substations and stuff like that. That may not be enough for them to let go of their biggest cash cow, but it will at least sweeten the pot a little bit. So however that works, yeah, we need some, we're sure there's going to be plenty of pushback, but if we don't say what we need, if we don't come out as the moral voice, who will? Juve, back to you about what's our next step? You're on mute. I'm gonna say, I can't.
I
we
don't
can't-
know why it wasn't letting me unmute. Apologies. So really quick before we all go, we want to leave you with two things. You know, I think it's always really important that people across Minnesota, different communities, are telling and sharing their stories. And so we want to ask you to look into what's going on in your local school or local community and how this proposal of solar on schools could benefit them. Do some research, some reading, definitely ask us questions. So that would be one thing. And then the other thing that we want to do is try to keep a group going like this to check in once a month or so, and we'll find the dates and all of that, and report back on what you've learned and whatnot, because eventually we want to use these stories and why we need this to happen for our communities and for our schools, and you are key to helping us tell those stories. Julia, do you want to add anything before I finish with all the other ways to get involved?
No, I think that sounds great. What we're hoping is that if you have a local school, let's figure out what their story is, just like those two pine tree schools, the Pine River and the Pine Point School is. What is the story in your place? Because if we can bring those stories to the legislature, I think we're going to have a lot of power. And we're here to help you do that.
Thanks. And then lastly, this is a very busy slide, but everything is available on our website. And you can stay engaged, obviously, on this idea of or proposal of the solar in schools. But there are many other conversations happening at the legislature. And there is also a few events coming up at the Capitol, online, and you can find all of this information on our website. We do have another similar study group like this one on February 1st, focused on the Green Bank, which is another proposal in our legislative agenda. And with that, Julia, I think we're good.
Yeah, any questions for you all about how you can engage? That's where I guess we'll put that out there. If there aren't questions, I'm just going to say a couple words about February 15th. There's 2 days actually that you can go to the legislature. And Sarah, if you would put the 100% campaign lobby day in the chat as well, I'd appreciate that. Coming up on the 25th, there is an opportunity to join with a huge coalition, 70 organizations who are promoting 100% clean electricity by 2040. MNIPL, Honor the Earth, and Climate Generation, all of us are supporting the 100% campaign. So it's a really good opportunity to go there and promote that. February 15th, we're going to actually have a rally that's going to focus on Indigenous rights and climate justice. We're going to have a lot of energy in the rotunda. We're going to do a rally in the round. It's going to be an incredible time to bring your communities and your signs and yourself. Before that, we'll be lobbying specifically about this solar on schools bill. So put both of those dates on your calendar and show up at the legislature. Judy has asked, how do we find out about solar schools in your district? That's a wonderful question. I think the answer is that it's going to be different for every person. My suggestion is that you all go to your local school district, find out if they have solar. If they don't have solar, maybe a phone call to their administration, and ask them, are you thinking about that? we're going to have students from across the state with Climate Gen who are able to join you in asking that question. I know, Judy, we actually had a moment a few years ago where you were working with youth from Minnetonka in the West Metro to ask some questions about climate action plans. This might be an opportunity to see if there's some youth in the Climate Gen's team who would be interested in asking that question with you. So again, if you have an interest, if the first thing you can do is find out what's out there and what are their intentions, and then we can go from there. And that's the conversation we're hoping to have in these monthly gatherings, so that by the time this incredible and bold legislation is passed, you're going to be ready to help your school be one of the first to receive the loan. All right, we are at 1 p.m. So I will sort of officially give us the sign off. If folks have specific questions and you want to stay on, we'll be here to answer those questions for a few more minutes. Thank you though for joining us, and let's stop the recording.